Putting the Pieces Together with Jigsaw Learning focuses on stories from the field as leaders implement collaborative response. Join us every month as we invite our partners to share how they are meeting the diverse needs of students with the integral understanding that every child deserves a team.
Welcome back to another episode of Putting the Pieces Together with Jigsaw Learning. Kurtis, Lorna, and I are joined today by Nancy MacLellan, who is retired now and on her own in a consulting business. But I had the good fortune to meet Nancy when I taught in Fox Creek and maintained connections with her as we both worked in Northern Gateway. And so I'm really excited to hear about Nancy's next steps on her journey. So hi, Nancy.
Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, guys. Hi. Thanks for having me.
We are so glad to have you, Nancy. Do you want to give our audience a little bit of background about you and your experience and, what you love about the job?
Well, I've always loved teaching. I've been a teacher for a very long time. I spent more than 30 years as a teacher. Not all of it teaching, some of it staying home and raising my family. Originally from the East Coast. I've been living in Alberta now for about 15 years. I worked in a small rural school for most of that time, in a junior kindergarten to grade 3 school, and with many different roles. I was a classroom teacher in grade 1 and grade 2. I did some intervention support in the end when we decided that we really needed to do something to tackle the learning difficulties that we were seeing in our classes. We had little ones coming with very low language skills, and they were really struggling. So we started an intervention, and then that was my role. Developing that and putting that in place. And then when I retired this past June, I decided that I would continue to work with that idea and try to spread that word of reaching all of our students' needs by doing a large-scale intervention. And that's what I've been doing some talking with Kurtis and Lorna about, and kind of spreading that word.
Well, we know that that's critically important work, and we're going to learn so much about that as well. But I think we'd be remiss, Nancy, if we didn't have an opportunity to talk about your other passion post-retirement, and that is as a cruise aficionado. Do you want to share your background around that? And we know it's something you and your husband, Chris, definitely enjoy pre and post-retirement for you.
Yes, for sure. So as I retired, my husband, Chris, who is also a teacher, continues to work, but also now has an eye towards retirement. So he's looking for something that he could do, and his passion for travel, he's going to be looking at traveling anyway. So I suggested probably he should look into becoming a travel agent. He had looked at it previously, but so he reignited that. So his travel agency is Mac Evans Travel, and he specializes in cruising and family vacations, making memories one trip at a time. We loved traveling with our girls when they were younger. And we found that cruises were our ideal family vacation. The kids loved going to camp. We loved sending them to camp. Then we loved spending time with them when they came out, and we did dinner together. So they cruised the world. They saw different places. They saw places that were much more glamorous than we would ever live, and places that were far from what we would ever consider livable. So we gave them a real worldly experience, and so now that's my husband's passion, and I kind of go along for the ride. So we've been cruising, and we were on a train ride, and we've been doing all different kinds of travel, and it's been really wonderful now to be able to work to do that during my retirement.
Oh, that's outstanding, Nancy.
Yeah,
we had to get that plug in there for sure. So our history goes back a fair while as well, when we were engaging with your school division and really talking about collaborative response and how do we meet the needs of all students. And I can remember when we were talking about, developing out your continuum of supports, and when do you start to provide time to be able to provide some of the more in-depth interventions. And at that time, I had shared with you a setup that we had built within my own school, something that we had come to refer to as BLAST. Your eyes lit up with that, and obviously took that little seed and grew it into something. So for those listeners that are here, can you describe what BLAST is, what that stands for, and what it looks like within your previous school, and how you're sharing it out now.
So yeah, my principal Sherry and I, we had been because I was at that time a literacy support teacher. I was doing some LLI, level literacy interventions programs, and doing some I did call them booster groups. So we had some like really struggling grade 3s. So I would have a group come out in the afternoons, and I had 3 or 4 TAs that I would give instructions and give specific programs with steps in it to try to help these kids. And
but primarily pull-out type scenarios.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in groups of 10 or 12 pull-outs, because these specific children, and then I'd have 3 or 4 TAs working with 2 or 3 at a time, doing things like online reading books, different skill building kind of activities, but all pull out through the afternoon. They would be out of their social and science classes, social studies and science. And that was okay, but we felt like we were always playing catch up. We're working with grade 3s, grade 1s and grade 2s. Their learning is so essential in the classroom. We didn't want to remove them for blocks of time. So the grade 3s, we just really needed to try our best to catch them up in the end. And we didn't seem to be making a lot of headway. So when you mentioned the whole group, the whole school, it was really fascinating to us. And it really seemed like it would be something that would help a lot of our students all at the same time. Mm-hmm. So from there, Sherry and Chris and I went to a conference in January that was the Literacy Day here in Edmonton. And I went to a presentation by the Learning Disabilities Association, and they talked about catching kids before they fail and kids falling through the cracks. And they had some really fascinating, great courses to take. One in particular that I took on the beginnings of learning to read, phonological awareness, phonemic awareness. And that really opened a door for me to what could be causing our lag in our reading development at our school. And then in the spring, we got together actually at the Collaborative Response Summit, and we met with some of the other people within Northern Gateway, and everybody was really pretty excited about this idea. So Sherry and I decided we'd go ahead. So BLAST, when you presented it to me, it had stood for Basic Literacy Acquisition Skills Time. Mm-hmm. And then as we worked, I changed the acronym. So now I say it's Building Literacy and Supporting Teamwork, because that's why it fits into collaborative response so well, because it is all about teamwork. It's the teamwork of your staff working together to make it successful for the kids, putting together these little teams of kids that are going to work together and support each other. And the whole idea is that you do a large scale intervention. So you either take multiple classes in the same grade. Some of the schools in Northern Gateway have like 6 grade 1 classes. So you could do it with just grade 1s, all those classes. Or you could do it whole school. So in my school, we did kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3 all together. And it starts with a dedicated time block. So you have a dedicated intervention block where nobody has anything outside of the classroom. There's no computer, there's no library, no music, none of those specials that the kids are going to miss. Because I don't know if you've ever tried to work with a group of kids while the rest of the class is at gym, but that doesn't work. It doesn't. So this way, everybody is free to come. And then you assess the kids, you find out what their basic needs are, what building blocks are missing. That's the key. And then you put them in small groups to build those little building blocks. And the kids move through those skills one by one, learning all those building blocks until they become proficient readers. And my role now that I've retired is I created the materials that would support that within a school. So I've created the lessons and I call them toolkits to teach those skills, along with an assessment to pinpoint them and place kids where they need to be. And then I also provide training services to schools because it is a big project. You need somebody who likes not chaos, but organized chaos, because in the end, we had 140 students and 23 staff changing every 9 days, always meeting the needs of every student. So it takes an organization to be in place to be able to facilitate that. And that's what I absolutely love. So I offer my services for training for staff on literacy development, reading development, as well as the organizational end of it, so that a school could implement that large scale intervention.
Thanks for sharing that, Nancy.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. You talked about how collaboration is so important and so key in that work. Can you tell us how this that intervention block connects with collaborative team meetings?
So I know that at collaborative team meetings, because we took part in them for a very long time, almost since you started, I think. And I know that the focus is always, not always, the focus can be on where are the struggles and who else is struggling, and what are some steps we can take to work together to solve that that struggle. And it really is about taking it off of a teacher and putting it onto our collaborative group to brainstorm, to use all of our resources. It always amazes me how you think, I wish I could do this, and somebody would say, oh, I can do that. You're like, what? You can do that? And they're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And it was beyond my even thoughts that anybody would ever be able to do it. And yet somebody can just casually say they can do it. And like, even like little programs or little things, or I wish I had that. And somebody says, oh, I have one of those. But if you're not talking to each other, you don't realize that. You don't realize your strength. And that's what I like to think of with BLAST, is that you're really maximizing your collective teaching power by bringing everybody together and really using everybody's strengths and everybody's full capacity to do it. So in the collaborative response model, when we get together and we find out that each of us is struggling with a few students that need this or need that, for us to be able to say, can we do a group of those kids? Can we do a group? For example, I had a grade 3 group who had a handful of students who really still struggled with letters and letter sounds, really didn't have that proficiently. And we had just started a new program in our school, Zoophonics, in the grade 1 class, and our grade 1 teachers were wild about this. And I said, well, maybe the grade 3s who never did get that, maybe they could benefit from learning Zoophonics. It has motions, it has things, but they're grade 3s. So like, when are they ever going to be able to meet with a grade 1 teacher? Well, they can do that during BLAST. We put those 6 grade 3s plus the 2 grade 2s and the couple of grade 1s that were really struggling. We put them all together in a group. And because they all take part in BLAST, where they go and what they do, there's no stigma attached to that. The fact that the grade 3s are learning letters and letter sounds, nobody really knows that, because they just go to the classroom and do BLAST. Everybody's doing BLAST. So everybody feels like they're part of the program without isolating those kids that really need that one specific skill. And we've had some really good success with that, because we can really meet those kids' needs. So it's another way to support. Plus, then you have the grade 3 teachers who maybe don't have a lot of experience doing letters and letter sounds, because really they should be reading. And so now that grade 3 teacher feels supported, because she doesn't have to find all the materials. She doesn't have to come and find supplies. She doesn't have to figure out how to teach letters and letter sounds while she's doing novel studies, while she's doing all the other grade 3 activities. She doesn't have to necessarily focus on supporting that student in that particular skill, because they know that they're getting it during their BLAST time. They'll still do their adaptations and their differentiation and everything, but they'll know that those kids' needs are being met during BLAST time, because that's when we can focus on that.
So Nancy, I've always been fascinated with this idea of an intervention block within a school and how it connects to collaborative response. So when you were sharing there before that you would pull out students from the classroom, you'd have EAs that you would be directing to take students. Really, that's what we would refer to as a tier 3 support. It's a support provided by someone other than a classroom teacher.
Right.
And within this, what you're doing is really creating a block of time in the day BLAST, where this could be a space where we could be intentionally integrating tier 1 supports, things that we could do for all students, tier 2 supports, where the teacher could have some additional time with their students, or tier 3 supports. But now, instead of just having a literacy lead teacher and a couple EAs, other teachers can be providing those tier 3 supports during that time. So really what you're doing is maximizing that time with a block to be able to offer. And I could assume that you could even, if you wanted, offer tier 4 supports if you had someone external that was coming in for that. Do you want to talk about how sometimes that blast block could be utilized for more than just the let's work on this toolkit for the next 9 days?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I loved about it, is that, like, when you start to think about the power that you have, I mean, not to call it power, but it's power that you have, because you literally have access to all of the students and all of the teachers in that time period. So we had teachers like the library teacher. There's no library classes. Well, the librarian is now free, so she takes a group. If you have a gym teacher, if you're lucky enough to have a gym teacher at your school, they're free because you don't have gym classes. So we would do physical literacy in the gym. But all of those levels of support are present. So I can give you an example. So tier 1 support are things that you're going to do with larger groups during that time, because our small groups, we want to have no more than 6 in a group. But of course, within our group, or within our school, or even within a grade, we don't have a 6-to-1 ratio of children to adults. If we did, we probably would be on top of everything and be able to just have that all day. But because we don't have that ratio, what we want to do is we want to take some of those students and put them in larger groups. And then that frees up staff to work with our lowest students, our most struggling students in small group. Those larger groups are actually tier 1 teachings. We would do things like comprehension activities. We can do some numeracy activities and even mix it up there. But we can do things like readers theater. So readers theater would be considered something I would do with my whole class. I would do readers theater. But when I have a really diverse range of students, it can be a real challenge. And so this way, if I've got a group of students who really don't need intervention, they're all fine. They all assess right through all the skills. They know all the skills. Now I'm doing readers theater to build fluency with a narrower range of abilities within my group, and that makes it easier for me to teach it, more effective to teach it, and it's a tier 1 instructional practice.
But the beauty of that is you're working through 9-day cycles. So it doesn't mean that this kid will forever and a day be in a small group and this one will forever and a day be in a large group. I can, after that 9-day cycle, we can look at something different. And I imagine even find opportunities for an enrichment cycle for some of our students.
And that flexibility for both staff and students is really beautiful.
Yeah, it really benefits everybody. So I had a teacher come to me when you talk about extension. I had a teacher come and say, is there a way that we could do a writing round in Blast? And I said, are you saying you would like to do a writing round? And she said, I am.
I see what you did there. Smooth.
That was good.
I said, then you can. She said, well, I'd really like to have them for 18 days. Like, I really think I need 2 rounds and done and done. So I gave her, like, she had a dream group, right? All of the kids that can read and can, like those ones that need that extension. And for her, she got to really push those kids because they were all quite capable. And for her, she got to kind of go through some activities that she wasn't sure. She could really round it out. She could figure it out. And then when she went back to teach it in her own class, she had an end goal in mind and she knew where she could get them. And for her, it was very beneficial. And for those kids, they came out with a full-blown book and did authors tours and all of that within our school. So really beneficial to everybody. And for a teacher to be able to find their passion as well as be able to benefit those kids. We also did extension groups with things like math. So Chris loved the math and did the Steve Wyborny is one of the math guys that has these estimistries and these online activities, totally appropriate for grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. And he would lead them through that. Very open-ended, very much building the oral language, the discussion, things like that. And better in a bigger group. You don't really want to do that with 6 kids because that's not enough. But again, that tier 1 teaching, he would do that with his own class, whole group. And it really is amazing to watch these little grade ones that can estimate. And the grade threes going, wow, he got that. Like, yeah, because he was looking here. Tell me what you did. And these little grade ones building confidence because they're high achievers in grade one. So what do you do when you've got so many struggling? Well, you put them in with the grade threes, and they really come up and they really feel empowered by that. So the tier one teaching really occurs in that extension piece or that large group piece. The tier two, where you're kind of doing things that you would have done it within your classroom. So you can do that with your comprehension activities and your small group work, doing some of those extensions. And then another really great, like I said, about taking those grade threes and putting them in with the zoo phonics to learn letters and letter skills.
Right.
Another really great use of the blast time. And it really is, once you start to think about how flexible it is and how great the access is to those kids. I know that some of our teachers have got very specific training, and sometimes it's really hard to implement that training. So for example, I did a multi-day course on Linda Mood Bell visualizing and verbalizing, V&V. And it's a very specific intervention, a very specific program to be used with a very specific learning need. So it's a child who cannot picture while they read. And once I took that training, another teacher and I did, and the other teacher was that grade one teacher, but she won't get to do that with a group unless somebody covers her class and she comes out of class. Then those kids have to come out of their class to be able to help. And it's a very essential skill for kids to have, but it's really hard to access the kids when they're really spread throughout the school, except in Blast. So in Blast, she could get a group of 6 who needed that skill, which we discover through our collaborative response meetings. And as we're having our meetings, we're talking about kids who really can't visualize. Their comprehension is really limited. They read and then they have no idea what it is that they're reading. And if we decide or determine that probably this program would be good for them, that's where they go during Blast.
During that block of time that's just consistent every day in my school.
Every day. So they get that half hour a day, every day, really for as long as they need. If 9 days is enough, that's great. If not, we can do another 9, or they can do 9 days. Then they could go out and do something like Reader's Theater, and then they could come back and do another 9 days.
Right.
You can really manipulate where they go and what they do to really suit the individual needs of each student. And I think the most gratifying thing for teachers is that when you're in your class of 20 odd kids and you've got 2 who really can't tell you the beginning sounds of words, you've got these 2 that sound out every single word they read and never blend it together. You've got these ones that are at this level. It's a daunting task to try to specialize every single thing. Now, in general, you can do part this and part this, but then you've got those kids that you just need things, especially if they are significantly behind, right? And then, but with Blast, we can hand pick the kids from the different groups and put them together. And then I have to say that the other most powerful part of Blast, and I can't really even overstate how important it is that when these kids get in these little groups where they need to be and they're learning skills that they need to learn, but it's the right step. It's that proximal development, right? Like it's just hard enough. These kids finally start to believe that they can learn. Because these kids have been sitting in, especially I think of these grade 3 kids sitting in classrooms, not reading anything that the teacher gives them. And yes, the teacher helps them, reads it to them, and they maybe have an EA in the room and they can help read it to them, but they can't read it. They can't read anything that's around them. They stop participating because everything they say is usually wrong. And they either act out, that's a lot of our behaviors, or they turn inward and they just silence themselves. But these kids are sitting in these classrooms and they just really don't believe in themselves. And when I sit with a little group of 6 and I can give an attaboy, attagirl, attaboy, attagirl, you got it, you got it, you got it. You can just see them. You can just see them change and be, I got it. Yeah, that's it. And what I love about these small groups is that, and what I emphasize in my training is that I make them successful 100% of the time. Because a lot of these kids, especially when they get up into grade 4s, grade 5s, grade 6, where they're not even really teaching them how to read anymore, they're just expecting them, and they fall further and further behind. A lot of these kids, they just need to believe that they can do it. And I can hand feed them exactly what they need to get it right, like the answer. So if I'm looking for what sound is at the beginning of bat, and they say, I don't know, I go bat, say B. They say B. And I say, you got it. That's it. That's the sound. Say it again. B. You got it. You're right. What's the sound at the beginning of bat? They'll say B. You got it. You're right. Now I gave them the answer 100%. 100% I gave them the answer. But I can control how much support I give them. I can wean that off. I can step that back. And I can backwards change so that they become more independent. But if they won't answer me, I can't do anything. If they won't give me a sound for an answer, I can't see whether they're right, whether they're wrong, how to help them. I can't see anything. So I need them to participate. So that idea of starting at 100% support for 100% success is huge. And in small groups, I can do that. And here's the kicker, is that I have found that teachers who have small groups of kids who are not their own, who are from outside of their own personal classroom, are far more willing and capable and energetic and eager to do that than they are within their own classroom. And I liken it to when your kid has friends come over and the kid's friend spills the glass of milk, you react totally differently than when your own kid spills the glass. Right? You react totally differently. It's a different feeling because they're visitors. They're coming. You've got a goal. Like, you're not going to let them run wild in your house, but it's a different kind of feeling. And so I've had a lot of teachers come up to me and talk to me about how fun the blast groups are, how much they love being with kids in a different age group, whether they're grade 1 teachers with grade 3s or grade 3 teachers with grade 1s. They love it. They love that interaction. It's a really different feeling. And also they're in their room with only 6 children. Like, it's huge. Even when I'm doing small groups, small guided reading groups of 6 kids, I'm not alone. I've got all the other kids that I'm watching, just because, they're independent. They can only be so independent, but to have the joy of just having 6 kids at my table and focusing on a single activity and a single skill building, it's very empowering for teachers and for students. And I love to see that and see that success.
Nancy, I'm an administrator. That's my hat I just put on.
Yeah.
I love the enthusiasm. I'm sold on this concept with the flexibility and the collaboration and meeting every kid's needs. But you also talk a little bit about the complexity of it all.
Mm-hmm.
What might you suggest are some of the first steps I could take as an administrator to bring BLAST to my school?
Great question. So, I've always said the most important, or the very first step you need to do as an administrator, is wrap your head around the embedded time block. Mm-hmm. Because you need to think about when it's going to be and when it's going to work. And the simplest way to start that is to start small and grow. And when we started with grade 2s. We did just the 3 grade 2 classes, and that's all we included. We probably could have started with the grade 1s because they probably needed it just as much, if not more. But our grade 2 teachers were incredibly enthusiastic.
Yeah, learn the process, pilot it.
They were buying in. We bought in big time. Like, we wanted it. We wanted it. Grade 1s were a little iffy. Grade 3s were a little iffy. So we did it first. And so you want to look at what teacher buy-in do you have. Our 3 grade 2 classes all had EAs at the time. So there's extra bodies. That was important. I know the principal started, our admin started right away trying to do a intervention block that cleared everybody, but ended up needing to put a couple of grade 3 classes in the gym during that period, or she had odd things in. But after we ran BLAST with just the grades, so we just did 3 classes. I think there were seven adults with 3 classes of kids. And I think we ended up with 7 adults. I think we did 5 small groups. And then the other 2 adults split the rest of the kids between them as 2 larger groups. So you can still be very effective. I mean, I've got 5 small groups with 6 kids in each group. That's 30 students getting small group instruction with 1 grade. So that's a bit more manageable. And then after we did our first round and the kids were thrilled and excited, the grade 3s came and said, so I've got a few kids that I think could be in this. We go, yeah, you're in or you're out. So everybody needs to come. Everybody needs to come. Okay. And then we ended up being able to add the grade 1s as well. So the enthusiasm within the school, the word will spread, but you want to start with that embedded time block. And then once you've got the embedded time block, then you're looking at resources. And that's one of the things that when I was in my role that I really tried to take all of the extra work that this would create off of the teachers. So I know that at Kurtis's school, when he started Blast, the teachers took it upon themselves to take a topic and to develop the lesson plan. Totally a way to go. But I took it upon myself to do that. I wanted consistency across the toolkits. I wanted to take away the need to relearn things. I wanted to have a regular systematic approach for each lesson.
And I think that's so critical for the success is there consistency between the different groups. That was one thing we learned early on, was if one room was using the time in a totally different structure and format than another, it was not effective for systemness.
And you want to have the experience being similar for kids, because if one teacher is doing the instruction through games and another teacher is perhaps using worksheets, which and those are different experiences for kids. So to be able to create a consistency from classroom to class or group to group is important.
Exactly. And that's one of the challenges I found with many of the resources that I would use, is that I would spend a lot of time teaching kids how to play a game. So I would have a game to play, and I would have 10 minutes. So I would show them how to play the game, and then we would start to take turns, and and then they have to roll the dice, and then they have to count out the things, and then they have to pick the card, and then they read the word. So, in 10 minutes playing, each student says 3 words. Well, that doesn't serve my purpose. So when I did it, I have 3 games that rotate through. They all play the same way. They just have a different setup. But the playing is the same. So the kids get a little bit of differentiation, a little bit of a difference, but they all know how to play. Once they finish one toolkit, the games are exactly the same. So they all know how to play. Every day is a word study activity, so a word sort or a word exploring with cards. They get very good at doing that. So that all runs really easily. And teachers really love that because it's very consistent and it really lets you take your focus off of the activity and put it on the learning, right? So you can really focus on those kids and make sure that every single one is participating. There's always something to hold. Like, it has to be multi-sensory. They have to hold a card, hold a cube, hold a token, hold something. So when I develop the activities and I develop the resources, I make sure that there's always something for kids to manipulate, because for some of them, it really is essential to their learning to be able to move, to be engaged. They don't get the engagement. A lot of the kids have fallen behind because when I'm teaching whole group and I teach Lorna, I ask Lorna, what sound does bat start with? And she says, t. And I say, listen to the beginning, bat. It's the first sound. And she says, b. That's great. Now I assume Kurtis sitting beside her has got that figured out, because he's sitting right beside her. I just taught her. When I say to Kurtis, what sound does bat start with? I fully expect him to say b, because he's right there. But our kids that are falling behind, they don't get that.
No.
If you're not teaching it to them, they're not learning it. And you'll say to them, what sound does bat start with? And they'll be like, oh, t. Didn't I just go through that with Lorna? Did I not just teach Lorna that? Right? Like,
Kurtis is going to take multiple iterations.
Bless his heart. Bless his heart. I know what group Kurtis will need to go in. But that's our kids that fall behind, is that they don't have that peripheral learning, right? Like they don't learn because kids around them are learning. They need to be taught directly. And so in these small groups, you can really do that. And then the further they fall behind, the more wrong they get, the less they're gonna try. They're not risk takers. They will not try, and a lot of these kids will just shut down. Or there are kids that act out and then just can get out of doing it because it's very uncomfortable for them to be in that situation. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility there and a lot of that individual instruction.
Nancy, we're coming to the part in our episode here where we ask all of our guests essentially the same question.
This question is brought to you by WeCollab. Designed by educators for educators, this comprehensive digital system aligns with the foundational components of collaborative response. Moving from conversation to action, WeCollab empowers classrooms, schools, and systems to provide the very best response for each and every child by informing action-based decision-making with data and evidence supporting student success.
In the spirit of knowing what you know now, what advice would you go back and give yourself when you first started BLAST, collaborative response, and bringing that all together?
I would say include more people. I would say include and collaborate more. Collaborate more. The most success we had was in BLAST was the year where we had our professional learning community time, our PLC time. We rolled it through a Friday. So every other Friday, I think everybody had a PLC block. And I would coordinate BLAST to end the Thursday. And then all the teachers would come in and we would talk about all of the kids and how well they did and review. And that collaboration is priceless. It really is. The strength that we have within our teaching community, the strength that our teachers bring to the classroom are really amazing. And often it just becomes so overwhelming to meet the needs that we have in our classroom that we get really focused on staying afloat. We get focused on treading water and keeping everybody kind of with us. I think we really need to rely on each other in that collaborative response model to try to build on everybody's strengths, to try to see where people can help to support each other so that we don't all feel like we're treading water together. I am always, and it's funny working together. I love it when teachers are doing things that are different from me because I really enjoy that variety. It gives me ideas, but I also really love it when they're doing the same thing as me. And I feel satisfied that I've got a colleague and a collaborator that I can work with. So either way can really be beneficial. I think we just really need to be open to that support of each other.
All right, Nancy. So reaching that end of this episode, can you share out with people where they could go to be able to learn more about BLAST, maybe to be able to contact you and see this as potentially a next step that they could see around really trying to envision when can you provide supports that we're identifying in our continuum of supports that are essential for kids?
There's those two parts, or the three parts, really, right? Like, how do I identify what the kids need? And then how do we give them what they need? And then how do we all work together to make sure that can happen for everybody? And that's what I really like about BLAST, is that it's that large scale, well, as large as you want it to be approach. So my company is Nancy Mac Consulting. At school, I was always Mrs. Mac. They called me Nancy Mac. So it's nancymacconsulting.ca. That's probably the easiest way to reach me. There's a reach me form on there. My email is nancymacconsulting@gmail.com. So, and Chris is macevanstravel.ca.
We will include that in the show notes as well.
Sure will.
Awesome.
If you're interested in anything, it's been an exciting journey. So I'm looking forward to working with individual schools to really help them meet that need. It's a lot to kind of get in the beginning part of it, but then it really just kind of goes, and it's really amazing the doors that it opens and the opportunity that you can give both your staff and your students by implementing it school-wide.
Well, Nancy, you've just reinforced for something that we share often. In fact, we were in a meeting just prior to this, sharing that very idea of the effort at the front is front-loaded. There is an investment that comes, but when you can put that in at the front, and where we see impact over time is just substantial.
Yeah,
Nancy,
really
we
is.
so appreciate your excitement and your passion, and that is most certainly contagious.
I really enjoyed the journey. I enjoy the learning, and I really think that it's something that can really help us support our learners of all ages.
Nancy, thank you so much for being here and sharing your enthusiasm. And I do hope our audience does reach out, because I had the opportunity to see the results of what you had implemented in your school, and to see the beautiful charts of kids that were here that are now here, and the success that this can bring. So I do encourage our audience to reach out to you, because this could be a key piece in making sure all our kids get their needs met.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jen.
Ensuring success for all students is a moral imperative for all schools, but it takes a highly coordinated framework of structures and processes to maximize the collective capacity of the team.
In collaborative response, 3 foundational components that transform how we respond to the needs of learners, we share an organizational mindset that involves fundamental shifts for schools and districts.
Numerous school and district examples, as well as access to a large number of resources, are provided within the text and in the accompanying companion website.
Join the growing number of schools using collaborative response to ensure high levels of success for students and staff, stemming from the essential belief that every child deserves a team.
Nancy's enthusiasm.
There's a little bit of it there.
Little bit.
Yeah.
Well,
exciting.
I know a lot of that enthusiasm, and Jen, you alluded to it in our conversation with her, is she saw the impact. I mean, we all saw the bulletin boards that had data color coded, and you'd see a lot of red in November, and then you'd look at the March charts and you'd see a lot of green as they were color coding that data. I mean, she saw the impact that this had, not just on the learners, but on the staff as well. So it definitely comes through in her enthusiasm.
A couple of things that stood out for me were flexibility, right? When she talked about those 9-day cycles and the ability to shift kids, and that the time was there to have the discussion at the end of the 9 days about, okay, which kids need to go where and what are our next lessons, like that.
But that cycling of the 9 days is critical. We see schools that set up those intervention things without the start and end date, and you just don't want a student trapped in that group for perpetuity.
And then she talked about the collaboration and really the teamwork, right?
Yeah.
The collaboration of the staff coming together and deciding those things, but even the culture of teamwork that's developed amongst the kids.
Well, and that idea of, I think her words were, involve more people. Bring as many into the conversation as you can.
Yeah, that really stood out to me too, Jen, is that, that idea of we're coming together very purposefully to help each other and to help our students, which that we would totally adhere to those ideas too. But just the fact that through this intervention block, we have that opportunity of meeting the needs of students and meeting the needs of teachers as well, and that growth and the collaboration together really has huge impact.
I did note, though, 2 leadership principles that we talk about often in around implementation. One of them is the value of piloting, of being able to start small with a group that is ready to see it fail, and be okay with that. And then with that idea of potential failure, that ready, fire, aim philosophy of we're going to fire and we're going to try, and it might not work, but we'll tweak and tweak and tweak.
as we go. To me, those are just so critical when we think about implementation, and it's lessons we always share back around collaborative response of where are the places where you could pilot with a small group who would be okay with it not working as to optimal performance off the start, and that's okay. But then also, how do we reinforce that we're going to fire and learn through that process and then aim?
Mm-hmm. The other thing too that really in that leadership realm of things that she talked about is embedding time, and how do we create, which we know is sometimes a huge barrier for people, of creating that embedded time. And for that intervention block to work ideally, you really need to consider, how do we create space in our timetable to be able to use that? And when we started this work in our school, we already had some ideas about what it would look like, but we didn't think we were quite ready to jump on the intervention block bandwagon quite yet. But we had put it into our timetable ahead of time, so that we knew it was a big rock.
Big rock that goes in first.
And then when we were ready, we were able to use it because we didn't have some of those competing things in the schedule like Nancy talked about.
And then the last thing for me that stood out, and it's something that we talk about with collaborative response in general, and therefore it would apply in the intervention block time, is the integrity and consistency, right? It's purposeful, it's intentional, and it's done in such a way that every child knows what they're going to experience. Every teacher knows what they're going to experience. Predictability, clarity.
Yes.
Consistency.
Right?
Yeah.
It makes it easier for staff transitions, should staff come in and staff go. And it helps with the buy-in, knowing that I'm not being asked to do more than any of my peers, whether I be a student or whether I be a teacher.
And the fact that it's not enough to create that embedded time and then just say, okay, we've got this intervention block, everybody go to it.
Yeah, best of luck.
But to be able to have that structure and have that support, and Nancy most certainly served in that role of, okay, so I'll lead this forward and help you as much as I can. But she also spoke to the idea of do this work together and design those pieces together with the teachers, because teachers have such amazing ideas and amazing strengths to be able to design incredible activities and incredible supports for students.
All right, Jen. So this is the part of the episode we always turn to you to work your magic. If you could summarize the key learnings out of today, where would you go?
First key learning would be around culture, flexibility, teamwork, collaboration. Second key learning would be around leadership, embedding the time, taking the risk to pilot and being willing to fail and grow forward. And that notion of ready, fire, aim. You're going to lead that, you're going to be vulnerable with it, and you're going to be there to support your staff as they do it. And then the second piece of the leadership piece is embedding that time. Giving the space so that it can happen, so that people aren't trying to work it out on their own. Now, whether that be the time for the collaborative team meeting or the time for the blast intervention, it is a big rock.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last thing I would say is integrity, consistency, predictability. Those are principles, tenets that we discuss all the time in the various aspects of collaborative response. And BLAST is no different.
All right, Jen, as always, it is a pleasure to be able to connect and once again boost our learning as we engage with all of our guests in our Putting the Pieces Together podcasts.
I hope you too are seeing the impact that you have by sharing your experiences, even from, you talk about collaborative response, but BLAST started in your school under one acronym and has grown as a result of the fact that you were just willing to share it.
Well, and really it was just a response to what are we going to do, which then necessitated the next question of, yeah, that's great, but now when are we going to do that? Again, it's how do you respond to the needs of your students and knowing that it may take some different ways of thinking within our building.
So it comes back to every child deserves a team.
Absolutely.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content. Make sure to follow us on social media, subscribe to the podcast and the Jigsaw Learning YouTube channel to access past and upcoming episodes. Join us again for more conversations about establishing, refining, and deepening collaborative response.